Hey everybody, welcome back to this series where I go through random RPG products that I have and give them a quick flip through and review. In this one, I'm going to be going through Dungeon Crawl Classics, along with a couple setting books for it, and some additional material for one of those settings. So essentially, this is an RPG, but I'm also going to be going through, different ways of different directions that RPG can go. Because DCC, if you guys are familiar with it, you'll know that it has really a wide variety of tones that would fit the system. And so the two settings that I'm going to be going through today kind of take that tone in the two directions, or two directions that it could go. But I'll go through the base book too, which some people are familiar with, some people aren't. I've had this book for quite a while. I had it in print form. I had to get rid of it because it was kind of ruined. I plan to get these in print again at some point, but for now I just have them in PDF. So DCC, of course, is super famous. It is an entire sub-group within the role-playing OSR sphere. It's almost not even OSR. I mean, it is OSR, obviously. It's influenced heavily by the old school, but it's its own thing going on, and there's a lot of really cool inspiration you can get from it, even if you never plan to run the game itself. And it's a piece of RPG. It's a staple of the RPG community, and so it's worth seeing the influences elsewhere because this book is really influential. And again, even if you don't play it, there's a lot of stuff in here for you to kind of enter into. Well, first of all, the art throughout this entire book is excellent. It's a very particular vibe. You're going to see that as we go through, but the art generally in all of these books is really, really good. Over the top, really old school in its tone. This is Goodman Games, Dungeon Crawl Classics. It's sword and sorcery, but also gonzo, also high fantasy, depending on the tone you want to take for it. But it definitely has that old school law versus chaos, and chaos is a really chaotic vibe. Now these books, especially the main book, has a lot of extra pages devoted to art, but also devoted to the group that made it, and extra promotional materials and stuff like that. But here's the base table of contents. This book is pretty big. This is just the first table of contents. There's a second page. This is about 450 pages, all said and done, plus the indices and the adventures. So you're looking at, I guess, around 470 pages with everything all involved. This book has all the base rules you need to play the game, as well as a couple extra adventures. And tons and tons of art. So there's a great page at the beginning about presumptions. And you're only going to enjoy this game if you understand and agree to these terms. Some from a manifesto. Great art there by Peter Mullen, I think. Then you have the core mechanic of the game, which is a D20 game, adding and subtracting to get to the DC. This is this is a roll higher than system. You're trying to get 20s, you're trying to get high. Now, one of the things that makes this game interesting is the dice chain system. So most of us, all of us, have the basic dice, right? The D4, the D6, the D8, the D10, etc. Well, this book also doesn't require necessarily, there are ways around it, but it really expects you to have a set of other dice too. Weird dice. D3s, D5s, D7s, D14s, D24s, D16s, D30s. And you can get those online, you can get those anywhere they sell dice, really. But it's just, most people don't have them offhand, so to get them you kind of have to, go out of your way to get them. But you don't have to have them. You could substitute other, you could just ignore that. But it's kind of part of the game. Characters, part 1. You are no hero. You're an adventurer, a reaver, a cut purse, a heathen slayer, a tight-lipped warlock guarding long-dead secrets. I like this because it sets the tone really well for the kinds of characters you're going to be. This is not high fantasy. This is not Lord of the Rings. This is gritty. Low magic. Well, not low magic, actually. Magic can go really high, but like dark fantasy, where things are grim and gritty and kind of grounded. Actually, no, not grounded, gonzo, but primitive until you get to really high levels, and then you get crazy powerful magic and stuff like that. This game assumes a funnel where you start at level 0, and then you go forward and have a bunch of characters that all die, and then some of them make it through alive, and those guys are level 1. That's a system that a lot of other games have taken in. Shadowdark, most recently in my that I know of, has taken this idea, turned it into the Gauntlet, but it's the same idea. Level 0 characters, and then you move up to level 1. I've played a ton of level 0 adventures for DCC. I haven't played that many level 1 or past adventures, I have to admit. And I'll talk about why. So here's the funky dice in the dice chain: D3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 20, 24, and 30. And so very often you'll get modifiers that roll +1 or -1 or +2, -2. But sometimes it'll say move up the dice chain, move down the dice chain. So instead of rolling a D10 for your attack, you roll a D12. Or instead of rolling a D20 to hit, you might roll a D24 or maybe a D16 if you have disadvantage or something like that, or the equivalent of disadvantage. You have ability scores, and they're basically the main basic ability scores: strength, agility, stamina, personality, intelligence, and luck. So it's slightly different. Personality combines will and charisma, and then luck is this extra one. But strength is still strength, agility is dex, stamina is constitution, and intelligence is still intelligence. The modifiers are squished from what you might be familiar with if you only know 5e, and they do matter ability by ability. So they're different for each of them. Like you get certain languages if you have, like for example, yes, you get modifiers -3 to +3, but you also have things like wizards. Like the difference between, say, a 7 and an 8 for a wizard is that it's still a -1 to your intelligence, but you'd get -1 spell if you have a 7 as opposed to no adjustment at 8. So you get the -1 modifier, but you have 1 fewer spell. So things like that, and the max spells you can know are different. You have luck rolls and what your luck applies to. So essentially you can have a luck score, which is a plus or minus modifier, and you can use those to re-roll, to add. You can burn your luck to add to your successes so that you can kind of bolster some checks. And then you have a particular birth sign that your modifier modifies. So if you have a +1 luck and you were born under the hawk eye, you would add that +1 to your missile fire damage rolls. Whereas most of the people wouldn't do that. So that's kind of cool. You have saving throws, 3 basic ones: fortitude, reflex, will, and languages. And here's the level 0 characters and the occupations that you get. A great table of occupations and what you start with as your level 0 character. Really basic stuff we're talking about: weapon training, trade goods, and alignment. Alignment's pretty important here: lawful, chaotic, and neutral. They're going to affect a lot of things in the game. And then you have level advancement and your classes. The classes are basic old school classes. You have cleric, fighter, thief, and mage, plus dwarf, elf, and halfling. So classic classes, and then race as classes. But what I think is kind of cool is that every class has sort of a special thing that's going on here. So clerics, they have miracles they can just kind of try to ask for. And it's risky because if you fail, it's a big deal. But you can just try it. And divine aid. You just beseech for divine aid, and you make a check, and if you succeed, something happens. If you fail, something real bad happens. And so basically, it's interesting because the more you call upon your god, the harder it is to keep doing it. And the less you call upon your god, so basically, like you're annoying them, is the idea. If you fail to call upon them, if you call it, then it can get bad for you. But otherwise it's fine. Here are the basic gods in the game: gods of law, neutrality, and chaos. You get the thief. Thieves are cool. Standard thieves. They get backstabs. They get thief skills. Reading languages. They get luck, and their kind of benefit is that they use a lot more luck than the other classes. And they get it back faster and things like that. Same with halflings. They get their luck back faster. Great tables. And it's interesting because depending on if you're a lawful, neutral, or chaotic thief, you're going to get different bonuses to the different skills. So a lawful thief doesn't get he gets a +1 backstab at level 1, whereas a chaotic thief gets a +3 backstab at level 1. And it maxes out at different levels. So your alignment as a thief matters quite a lot, as does your alignment as a cleric. Warriors are pretty standard warriors. They get attack modifiers. They get the highest crit tables of anybody, because that's one thing this book has, is crit tables. They get more hit points than anybody else. But they also do these things called Mighty Deeds, which is really cool. So essentially they get Mighty Deed dice, and if they roll certain numbers on those Deed dice, then they can try to do something really cool and extra in combat. So the example they use is when fighting opponents on a staircase, the character uses a sword to stab an opponent and then lever him over the edge of the staircase. Or when fighting a flying skull that was out of melee range, a character leaped from the back of an ally into a flying lunge that brought him within reach of a melee swing at the skull. So stuff that normally you'd be able to roleplay, the fighters can do it really, really, like, technically. I'm going to use this to see if I can succeed at this thing, instead of having to like make checks or work with the DM. You just say, I'm going to try this thing, and as long as it's reasonable or reasonably possible, you can do it, which is cool. And then there's militant orders and this or that. And then the wizard. Now the wizard is what makes DCC special, in my view. The wizard is what makes DCC special. The rest of the classes are pretty cool, but the wizard and the spells are just next level. It's what makes the game interesting. It's what makes the game engaging to me. It's also what makes the game off-putting, and so I'm going to talk about that and why. But first, I'll go through the other classes. So you have the dwarves, who are basically alternate fighters. They get, they get some special abilities, as you might expect. You get the elves. Now, going back to this page, you can see very clearly, right, Maiden being about to be sacrificed. It's that tone, right? Just like a lot of other books that we've seen. Some people don't like that stuff. They think it's kind of, old. But if you don't like that stuff, you're not going to like any of these books. This is old school in its sensibilities and in its presentation. You get the elf. Great pieces of art there for the elves. Awesome piece of art. Now, so again, one thing you'll see throughout all of these books is just incredible art. And then halflings. Typical halflings. Lankhmar the Lawful. This is a take on an older piece of art, I think. It was Something the Chaotic, and it's a similar scene. It's a guy riding through a walled city like this, and he's shooting random townsfolk and stuff like that. And, so here is the contrast here. Lankhmar the Lawful. And you have skills, which are basic thief skills, how to do it, when not to make a skill check, when to make opposed skill checks. That's it for skills. It's not a lot of the book. Equipment's pretty straightforward, what you might expect. Damage dice, ranges, costs, and GP, ammunition, and armor. And what armor does, it has check penalties and speed penalties, and it increases your fumble die. So basically, when you fumble, roll crit fail. If you're not wearing any armor, you're just going to roll a d4 on the table. It's not very bad, but the heavier armor you're wearing, the worse fumble you can do, which is kind of an interesting idea. And then there's equipment and mounts and related gear. Then combat, great art for the combat section. Basic overview, timekeeping, basics of the encounter, what you might expect, initiative, actions, movement, types of combat, armor class, attack rolls, just how to do the game, and a lot of different modifiers here. So, for example, right, if you're attacking an invisible attacker, or if the attacker is invisible, it gets +2 to the attack. If he's on higher ground, it's +1 to the attack. If he's using an untrained weapon, he's -1 die, so that means he drops down the dice table by 1. So if he's invisible and using an untrained weapon, instead of attacking with a d20, you'd attack with a d16, and you get +2 to your attack if you're an invisible, but you're attacking with something you don't know. Right? So you have these modifiers you kind of have to work with, and it's different for melee and missile. So that's one of the things that you'll see about this book, is that there are a lot of tables, a lot of floating modifiers, a lot of things you have to keep track of, or pages you have to have tabbed to get to. So the critical hits is a good example. All level 0 characters and all wizards use this critical hit table. So when they roll a critical success, you then roll on this table, and it's modified by certain things to see what you get. All thieves and elves use this table. Clerics, halflings, level 1 through 2 warriors, and level 1 through 3 dwarves use this table. 3 through 4 warriors, 4 through 5 dwarves use this table, etc., etc. Right? So you have, there's tables for each of the different classes, or even levels, depending on the particular classes. And some of these are really cool. This, like, if you get a 21 on the level 5 plus warrior table, you get godly attack, inflict plus 3d12 damage with this strike if the target dies moved for 10 feet, and make another attack on any foe within 10. So the critical hit tables can be really cool. High moments and then low moments as well if you roll the fumbles, because the fumbles are pretty bad. Mighty Deeds of Arms and how those works and the kinds of things you could do, and ideas for particular ones you can try. And then how damage and death works, healing and morale, how you can burn luck, and how you withdraw from combat. Turning the undead, spell duels. Now this is where the spell section starts, and spells are really incredible. Spell duels are awesome. They become this kind of mini game where you have different mechanics depending on what spell you've used to counter it. Like counter spell always can counter any spell, but then there are other spells that make sense to counter. So like, Shield of Ice is going to be a counter spell to Fireball or something like that. That idea. And again, opposed spells that can be used to encounter each other. That can be used to counter. So Fire Resistance counters Fireball or Scorching Ray. Any attack spell counters the same attack spell. Fireball counters Fireball. So if it gives you a lot more flexibility in how you're going to do it. And one of the things that is interesting about this is that when an enemy casts a spell, there are several ways that casting can manifest. So I'll give you an example. Let's go to a spell. Well, actually, first I'll get there. But basically, you have to guess I'll go back. You have to kind of guess what spell they're about to cast. And then here's a spell duel comparison check, so both sides roll, and then you compare and see what happens. And it can, if you can have a crazy kind of explosion. You can have some minor defender rolls high and stuff can happen in defense. It's really complicated, but it's really cool. It's a cool mini game, but it becomes a mini game in combat. So if there are two major casters, and if they roll the same, for example, you get a phlogiston disturbance, and these are really cool, crazy effects that can happen. So if you roll a 3, their time accelerates. Both casters see everything around them slow down. In reality, they are accelerating, and the surrounding characters see them move at incredible speeds. Resolve an additional 2d4 rounds of combat between the casters only. No other characters may act this time. At the end of this time, they slow back down to the mainstream flow of time. That's crazy. So it's these two, suddenly they cast the same spell, there's a phlogiston disturbance because of the way that the spells interact, and suddenly the two casters get to act for 2d4 additional rounds before anybody else does. So it's this becomes this really quick, I gotta kill the other guy so that he doesn't kill my allies in that time. Or something like that. So again, magic is just crazy, and that's just before we get into the kinds of magic and the spell checks and spell burn, the way you do it. You can always burn your health to cast spells. So if you roll a result and you haven't gotten quite enough to succeed in casting the spell, you can reduce your scores, or or rather you spell burn beforehand, and then you cast the spell. And if you can sacrifice 20, and you can choose your abilities to reduce. You can reduce strength by 7 to get +7 to your next attack score, and you get 1 point of those per day. But if you sacrifice it and then roll a 1, you permanently lose whatever you've burned. And if you sacrifice 20 points, you just automatically count as having rolled a 20. Spellburn actions, how the spellburn works, what it looks like. And you get regain spells. And then mercurial magic, which is when you learn a spell, every spell that you learn has a specific effect tied to that spell. So it's not just fireball, it's a fireball plus this mercurial magic, and every time you cast it, goes along with it. So sympathetic magic, for example, 22. You learn fireball, but you have this attached. The spell requires the caster have a personal belonging or physical piece of its target in order to function normally. The spell can be cast without it, but the wizard suffers a -4 penalty to a spell check. Like stuff like that. Some of them are bad, some of them are really good. And some of them are just bizarre. And then you get corruption. If you fail a casting of a spell, you can begin to corrupt and begin to warp, and there's a good vision of what that looks like. Major corruption, minor corruption, greater corruption, generic spell misfire. So not only will it corrupt you, but then the spell can misfire. Instead of casting polymorph on the creature, he accidentally turned his friend's head into a chicken. Deity disapproval. So if you're a cleric and you fail, it gets real bad. And then how you get your grimoire and how you learn rituals and known spells. There are 716 wizard spells, but the only ones that are known are these ones here. So from this point, from page 129 through to page, I think it's like 300 or so, this book is all spells. And the spells are pretty incredible. So let's look at a random one. Let's look at Chill Touch. So here's a level 1 spell. Range, touch, duration varies, casting time, 1 action, save versus will versus check. General. This necromantic spell delivers the Chill Touch of the dead. The caster must spell burn at least 1 point when casting a spell. He has to. So this one requires at least 1 point of spell burn to cast. Manifest. So when you cast it, you roll a d4, and that's how this one particularly appears. And so if you were trying to counter it, you would see that manifestation and say, okay, the wizard's hands turn black. Oh, I know that. That's Chill Touch. I'm going to cast the counter to that. If you fail it, right, you get corruption, and how it corrupts. It's this particular corruption to this spell. And then a misfire chance, and what the misfire of this spell does. And then you get the table. So you roll, and whatever you roll, if you roll a 1, it's lost, failure. You lose the spell for the day, you fail it, and worse, you lose, you get corrupted, misfire, patron, taint, all this stuff. If you roll 2 through 11, it's just lost and you fail it. But if you go past that, then you have measures of success. You target attack somebody who takes a d6 damage, and +2 additional if it's undead, and it goes up and up and up from there. So it starts off with this negative energy touch, but you go all the way up through to +32+, which is the caster's body glows a sickly blue light as he crackles with withering necromantic energy. Any creature within 10 feet of the caster takes d6 damage each round it stays within the field, and undead creatures take 1d6 +2 damage. Until the next sunrise, the caster receives a +8 bonus to all attack rolls, and every creature the caster attacks takes an additional 3d6 damage, with undead suffering an extra +8. So the range of the spell varies a lot. Now, this is awesome, right, because it gives you so much variety in your casting. It makes every casting interesting. It makes every spell a risk to do. The problem is, you have to have these pages marked or printed out, and you're going to return to them every time you cast them. And if you have multiple casters in your party, or you are a wizard casting spells as the DM, you have NPCs that cast spells, or the enemies casting spells, you're constantly checking the book. Constantly checking the book. And it's one of the things, I'm just going to be clicking through these spells. You can see Fireball, Fly, Gust of Wind, Haste. A lot of them are traditional spells. A lot of them are special and unique. You're going to be constantly checking this book. And that's one of the downsides I find to this particular work, is that you're just never, ever, ever going to be able to set this down and memorize it. Now, again, that's not going to bother some people. Some people are going to be like, yep, that's awesome. That's totally fine. I have this book with me, or I've memorized it, I've played it long enough, I know where everything is, I have it marked in my book. It doesn't bother me to slow things down and look, but you're just going to have to keep doing it. You're not going to be able to stop looking at the book. And I prefer games where you don't look at the book. I prefer games where I've set the rules aside and kind of just am able to play, maybe occasionally referencing something if it really needs to. But this book, you kind of have to go. Now, it still holds the idea that the DM makes a ruling and you go on, but a lot of these things are not things that rulings can take effect on, right? I mean, like the particular spell failure if you roll a 1, or which, because it's not always 2 through 11 results in just a lost spell. Maybe this one does, but maybe that one has a corruption on a 2 and 3 as well. And so you have to make sure you check the book to see, okay, is this one of those spells? Now, as a wizard, you're going to have those printed off or written down. The player will. But again, if you learn a new spell or anything like that, the crit tables and the fumble tables, the dice chain, the different modifiers for particular attacks and circumstances, this is old school in that you're doing a lot of math, you're doing a lot of paperwork to run this game. And again, some people don't mind that. And and it could be that I haven't just had a lot of experience playing this with good DMs who are really able to not hand wave that stuff, but manage it well. I certainly can't do it. And I'm sure there are good DMs out there who can run it well. So I certainly don't say that this is a bad system by any means. It's just really heavy, rules heavy, and not the sort of thing that I generally tend to play at the table. But the inspiration in all of those tables is incredible, right? Those spells and the ideas that those spells have, wonderful stuff for inspiration for your own games. All right, great piece of art here for quests and the journey. And what quests should be like. Good advice for how to do traveling and security and retainers and hirelings and all that stuff. And the judge's rules, the judge is always right, let the rules bend to you, not the other way around. Good piece of advice for a rules-heavy system, because you're going to have to, a lot of the time, make exceptions and modify things and all that stuff. General principles of wizard spells and how to determine new spells and how to summon familiars. Consulting spirits, using mercurial magic to define magic schools and supernatural patrons, and then the patrons that are in this game. And they're kind of like warlock patrons. They give you additional spells, and those spells have, you can ask them for help and they'll do particular things, but you don't want to fail too much because then they'll really corrupt you in bad ways. So it's an interesting system, but patrons are cool, and they're not all evil, and some of them are, but they're all definitely other. It's like warlocks from 5e or something like that. The 3 fates are really cool. They can be your patron. You can serve the 3 fates as a wizard. Okay, and then you get heroes, so you get luck and how to use luck and how luck can go up and down. Magic items, there's no such thing as a generic magic item. Everything's going to be interesting, everything's going to be special. Swords are special. Scrolls are interesting, potions are interesting, and then monsters. And this is another great section of this book, is monsters. How to make monsters mysterious, how to make them interesting and cool and unique, how to give variety to your humanoids, how to give variety to your undead, servants of law and chaos, and how to make them special. If you have a particular lawful creature that is an exemplar of that law or chaos, it can be special and have extra characteristics. Elder creatures, 1% chance that any mortal creature is an elder specimen. You can have an elder sphinx, right? Instead of just a regular sphinx. Fallible fiends, unusual traits for each of your monsters, which makes them a little silly and maybe off. And then some monsters don't play by the rules, and then death throws and how the monster does something really cool. So unique powers and death throws that the creature can have. Great piece of art there. How to balance encounters and critical hits by monsters. Monsters have their own critical hit tables. Dragons have their own. Devils and demons have their own. Giants have their own. Undead have their own. Monsters generally. And then treasure and how to balance treasure. Then you have a encyclopedia of monsters. And you can tell the kind of games that this is going to be playing with the kinds of creatures you have. Androids, giant ants, ape men, elder brains, cave octopuses, giant centipedes, cockatrices, cyclopses, deep ones, demons, and random demon tables, and then make them interesting. With more tables there to help make these guys specific. Dimensional sailors, dragons. Great tables for how to make your dragons interesting. There's special martial powers or special unique powers. Unique powers there. Elementals, gargoyles, giants, gnolls, harpies. All good stuff in the monster tables here. And then you get, humanoid creatures, kings, friars, knights, magicians, peasants, witches. And then the appendices, which is additional information for a thorough judge. You get curses, languages, inspirational reading, additional inspiration, right? OSR resources, third-party publishers, community sites, podcasts, events, poisons, sobriquets, table of names, and titles. And then you get 2 adventures in the back of the book. I'm not going to go through them, but one of them is a funnel, which I've run, and it's great fun. And the other one is a level 1 adventure, which I haven't run. The funnel is this portal that opens up in these standing stones, and it leads to this extra dimensional little place with treasure in it. You got to get in and out before the stars change. And then the other one is a sort of a foresty, cursed forest, or there's dryads and stuff like that going on. Great little adventures. And then the very back of the book is a bunch of promotional materials, which you just get a lot of pages of promotional materials at the end for this particular setting, with lists of adventures that you can get from there. And there are lots and lots of adventures, which I mostly have, because again, I just like collecting adventures, and there's some really cool ones. The art is all very, specific and able to be identified. It's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Distinctive. That's the word I'm looking for. Distinctive. It has a very distinctive style for the DCC vibe. Dungeon Crawl Classics. And then you get the back of the book. So DCC, again, a very particular vibe and style. I like it a lot. It's not going to be everyone's bag, and I don't know if a lot of people are going to want to run the system. But again, in terms of ideas, this is 470 pages of great ideas and inspiration for your campaign. Now, I wanted to go through relatively quickly 2 different settings of this book. One, it might take a little bit of time, but the first of these is it takes it in a very dark direction. So you can obviously tell this is gonzo, this is weird, this is heavy metal, this is, old school style fantasy. And one of those vibes, again, is that heavy metal dark. And so this is Hubris, which is a world of visceral adventure. It's a sword and sorcery campaign setting. Now this is dark and gruesome, grim and despairing, and there aren't heroes here. I wouldn't really recommend this for a lot of people. It's not my favorite vibe. But again, random tables here and ideas, there's some really good stuff in here. You can tell the art is very gruesome. Here's the basic idea. This book is only about 350 pages, so it's a lot shorter than the other. Well, about 100 pages shorter, 130 pages shorter. It's got extra character creation options, so extra classes and races, backgrounds. It's got a setting summary and a world map. It's got new equipment, and then the territories of the book, and that's a good chunk of the book. About 100 pages of the book is the territories and the random tables that go along with that. You get new spells and patrons, which are mostly horrifying, new strange gods that you have in this particular set. And then you have about 50 pages or so of DM tools, which are some of them are really cool, really useful. And then you get magic items and monsters, and then 2 extra adventures at the end of the book. One is a funnel, and one is level 1 adventure. So I'll run through it pretty quickly. An introduction to the setting summary. This is not a fairy tale or an epic ballad. This is a savage world. The kingdoms are not kind and benevolent. There are no easily recognizable heroes in the world. That's some of these ideas here. You're looking at a very dark and dangerous, scary, sad place. So that might not be your vibe. It's not mine. But, again, I didn't get this book necessarily to run this setting. I got it for a lot of the random tables and ideas that this book gives you. Cool occupations for level 0 tables, but you can things like alien abductee, anarchist, asylum guard. And then the different races and the occupations that those races might have. Other new classes. You get an alchemist class. They brew potions and do obviously what you might expect. The Blood Witch uses blood magic. The Druid, more traditional class, which you find in here. And then the Shadow Dancer, which is a great class. When I was growing up, I was playing 3rd edition. My hero was a fighter, but the other guy I played with, my friend, he always wanted to be a Shadow Dancer, so he finally got to be one. So that was his 3rd edition class. He was a Shadow Dancer. The Avarian, they are kind of evil bird people. Or evil, evil probably not, but everything in this world is evil, so they're just, gruesome bird people. And then you get the Ekrask, which are the lizard folk, half demons, which are like tieflings, but they're more demonic. And then murder machines, which are like golems, and then you get mutants, which are your, they have strange effects that as you might expect a mutant to have. Some optional rules: sacrifice shield, which is a rule I always like to see and I always like to use, and special weapons, and then weapon damage by class. You can just do light, medium, and heavy instead of doing particular damage. You can do, if you want to make it simpler, instead of having weapons, classes do damage with particular kinds of weapons. So every warrior knows how to do, pretty decent damage with regard to whatever weapon that they have. That's the idea. And, classes that don't use weapons don't know how to do that very well, even if they have a really good weapon. Some people aren't going to like that. Some people are going to like that kind of idea. Class damage instead of weapon damage. Then you have the breakdown of the territories. And again, the territories themselves are pretty dark and depressing, but the tables and the ideas are really cool. So you have the Blighted Sands. You have the Lay of the Land, which is a D100 table of stuff to see in this region. And then you have a D100 encounter table of stuff you can run into in this region. And then you have particular locations with rumors and adventure hooks that connect to it. And occasionally there's an additional bit of extra information there. Then you have the Bogwood Swamp. And again, those ideas, and the locations there. Stilt Town is a cool idea. It's this town built over the swamp. Canyons of the Howling Red Rock, same idea. You get through all these, the frozen wastes. You get the Great Plains of Unbidden Sorrow. You get the this is a big one. The Land of Perpetual Stone and Mire. You get the Mountains That Crawl. I mean, again, and one of the things you'll see about this book is that the art is awesome. It's very in that same style as the whole book. Some of it's pretty silly, some of it's gonzo, some of it's all gonzo. It's all over the top. The land, the unsettled expanse, dinosaurs and apes and cavemen and stuff like that. The weeping forest of forgotten memories. Very grim, flavorful locations. Okay, you get special spells from the particular patrons, which are really creepy stuff. I mean, again, like I don't like a lot of this stuff. It's not my tone, but some people again love this stuff. I'm gonna skip through. Yeah, the strange and terrible gods of Hubris. All this stuff, interesting for the world, creepy. Some good ideas about spells and settings and things there. And then you have chapter 6, which is GM tools and tables. And this is, I think, one of my favorite sections of the book. You have ancient and forgotten demigods and random tables for them, bandits, brigands, and rapscallions, city district generators, diseases, grave digging tables, NPC generators, the plains, which is like, traveling for 4 dimensions, and so you decided to make camp, strange and interesting herbs, taverns and inns, a vial of some potions, Instatown generator. What are these strange and ominous ruins? And then the years of Hubris. So ancient and forgotten demigod forms. You roll for it there, and then you have, the way that this whole thing works is you roll each of the main dice, D4, D6, D8, D10. Sometimes it's the whole dice chain, sometimes it's just the basic ones. And you get, you look at all the results and you have one particular thing. So you roll all of them, you get a D4 holiday, a D6 altar, a D6, D8 blessing, a D10 followers, D10 percentile temple, D12 cult leader, D20 god of. And then if you just roll that once, you have everything that you need for this particular demigod and his followers. You have bandits, brigands, and rapscallions. You have a gang and how many, what their name is and how many members they are and what they are. Encounter and plot hooks for that gang, and then bandit leaders. You could either read straight across or roll 3 times. Same with city districts. You have a district name with rumors and hooks, events, and key distinctive characteristics. It's a D20 table. You could read straight across or roll 4 times and develop your own distinct district for a city. Then you have diseases and how they're contracted and what they do. Grave digging and what you find if you dig up the grave. NPC generator, or roll 2 D30s, and you can do it however many times you want. Names, you get a first and second name, an occupation, and a description, and it gives you a character here. 2 D30s means you are going to have a bit of a curve to it. You're more likely to get some results than others. Then you have a plains of Hubris generators. So you roll D3. You roll all the dice chain, and you get a particular plane. So you emerge from the portal X. It's the season. It's the local denizens are. Time functions this way there. Interesting things there. Problems there. The religion is. More problems. Leader of the plane or just your local area. You appear in the plane here, and how to travel to the plane. Strange effects when you get there, and the type of plane that it is. Number 30 is a plane of all dragons. Pretty cool. So you decide to make camp, D20 table, about what happens when you wake up. After you camp, strange and interesting herbs, You can make really cool herbs that way. Taverns and inns and tavern generators, a great little tavern generator table. D30, you have you roll that whole dice set and you have a complete tavern all set for you. And then there's a vial of random liquid, and then the same thing with an instant town generator or village. Roll a thing and you get the whole thing. Village size, political structure, interesting features of village layout, more interesting villagers, adventure hooks. What are those strange and ominous ruins? So cool ruin nearby. Again, the same thing. You drop all your dice once and you have an entire ruin with all of the stuff built up for you. Declaration of years, magic items towards the back of the book, particular items, artifacts of particular deities. You have these amazingly magical dice. They're basically a deck of many things, but you roll the dice and you get a random effect if you roll them, or how many you can choose to roll, all that. Monsters, and they're pretty gross, but not all of them. They're Barghast, which is a D&D classic monster. Bog Witch, Brain Grub. There are only 5 dragons on Hubris. Malevolence, the Corrupter, Fury, the Blighter, and the Gatherer. Fae, Fallen Angels, 4 Goblin clans, the Clind, and Metalphage, Orcs, Plague Doctors, Steam Mechs, Vampires, Water Bears, and then the Adventures that Came from Outer Space, which is a pretty silly little level 0 funnel. I'm not going to go into it, but it's essentially there's a flying saucer that lands. I ran it. It was great. Almost every character, level 0 character, died. I think everybody made it out with like 1 or 2 characters of their initial 5. It was a big group of people we were running for a birthday party, and they all got wrecked. But it was a fun adventure. So Hubris is not to everyone's taste, definitely, but you can see how the DCC could go. It's compatible, certainly, with it. It's a certain tone that fits with one of the within the general tone of DCC is this kind of world. But another kind of world that also fits within the DCC world is the Lankhmar world, the world based on the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser books. Lankhmar and Nuwan, I think is how you say it, Nuwan, and that is a box set you can get. I used to have it in, again, I used to have the box set. It also got ruined, so I wasn't able to keep it, but I have it in PDF here, and there's a bunch of extra stuff. So this is divided into 3 books. You have the Judge's Guide to the World, you have a Compendium of Secret Knowledge for special rules to make that world more flavorful, and then you have the particular city of Lankhmar, along with some maps and a particular adventure. So I'm going to run through them really quickly. Now here, there is the map of the whole. I'll show it to you here. That's the map of the whole of Nuwan. You get a sense of what it's like, and again, the style of map you're looking at. This is much more sword and sorcery. This is, again, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, so it's got a particular tone that's less grim dark. It's still sword and sorcery. It's still kind of got some gonzo things going on. It's still got a particular vibe, and it fits within the DCC, but it's a different direction than Hubris is. There's a bibliography of Nuwan sources. If you want to go read the books, you'll get a sense of what it is. It's the cosmology. You get an overview of the whole world, the lands. You get the people, the cultures, languages, exotic dialects. This is really cool. I like Nuwan a lot. If I was going to run DCC, I would run DCC in Nuwan. I think it's really, really cool. And you get the Pantheon there, the calendar and how the days work, and alcohol, because of course you're gonna need to know alcohol in a game like this. The Gods of Trouble. There's just so much information about these patrons. Then you get rules and advice on how to run it. Optional downtime rules, carousing rules, which are great. The table is pretty small, but you get this is a D20 table, but you get some cool things that can happen. You can lay low, because one of the ideas behind this world is you're mostly going to be thieves, doing illegal stuff, and so you're going to be robbing temples and plundering towers and getting into street battles with constables. And so, well, you're going to probably need to lay low. How that works here. You get magic items, how to run urban campaigns, NPCs, and how the meet works up, which is the sort of session 0, the party coming together. You get monsters, particular monsters of this setting. Some of them are great. And then an afterword with 100 things to see in Lankhmar. You get additional books, so I'm not going to go through these in any sort of detail, but you get the Compendium of Secret Knowledge, which is a great book. It goes through extra rules, why there aren't any priests, and how to add priests in if you want them. Special rules for, I'll go to the table of contents. Different places of origin, new rules for magic and combat and healing, and how luck can work here, and some more extra items. And then the City of the Black Toga, which is actually Lankhmar itself, and a breakdown of every district and what's happening. They're very similar to Hubris in terms of the tables that you roll for each of these districts. So you could use this as is, or if you're planning to run your own city campaign, make your own city, you could use this as inspiration and take from these tables and build your own districts and things going there. You also have a map of Lankhmar itself. And then finally you get an adventure in this box set called No Small Crimes in Lankhmar. It's level 0 or level 1, or I really love to do a level 1 adventure. It'd be harder to do as a level 0 adventure, I think. But you could. And it's just essentially an adventure with you're breaking into this house, or you're trying to hide in this house, and it turns out that it's a wizard's house, and you are shrunk down to tiny size. And you have to find a way to get back to your normal size and get out. It's a great little adventure. No pun intended. All right, well, as you can see, DCC has a lot of different, it's a different vibe and tone. It doesn't necessarily have one that it follows, but there is a sort of range, and you can get an idea of the kind of thing that DCC lends itself to, which is gonzo, kind of over the top, sword and sorcery, maybe heavy metal, maybe dark fantasy, but certainly the spell power levels can get really crazy high with spell burn and wizard's duels. The level 0 funnel assumes you're going to be kind of gritty, peasants, and starting off in that sort of very low power, but it can ramp up really quick. And then the art really adds to this vibe that it's going for of over-the-top, gonzo, ridiculous, old-school fantasy. It's not going to be everyone's vibe, but a lot of people love it. If you're okay with a lot of paperwork, at least at first, if you're okay reading a lot and getting a good sense of the book as a whole, and you have a good head for rules, and you're really okay making rulings on the fly based on the books, like getting the rules down and then building off of them on your own as a DM or as a GM, I think you'll be great with DCC. But even if you don't want to run it, even if you don't want the system, even if you don't like the tone, the tables and the inspirations in each of these books are really, really good. Now, they're expensive. The DCC books are, especially the core books, they're not hugely expensive, but if you're going to buy them in print, it's an investment. So I would wouldn't necessarily, especially something like Hubris, I wouldn't really recommend. I mean, again, the only reason I have it, honestly, is I got it when I was first getting into this DCC years ago, and I kind of wanted a setting book, and I've never run it. I've definitely taken some of the ideas from the tables, but it's not my thing. I don't like that vibe of really grimdark, gross fantasy. But some people do. But I would at least recommend getting Nguyen and the DCC Core Book. That's what I'd recommend. All right, well, I hope this has been interesting. And if at some point you guys want to see, I have a whole bunch of DCC adventures. I got a humble bundle up for them a few weeks ago, or a few months ago at this point, I guess. And I've run some of them, but mostly for other games. I've run a couple of them as gauntlets. And I'd be happy to go through them, but a lot of them I haven't run. And there are, I think, people online and YouTube who have run them, and so they'll do better reviews of them than I would be able to. But if you'd like to see a few of them at least, or some of them, I'm happy to do so. Anyway, hope this has been interesting. I'll see you guys around.